Vanderlip got a consortium together of 50 investors and said, let's invest in this land, which was pretty amazing if you think of it. They hadn't even seen it. And Vandenberg went ahead, but in the end couldn't raise the money to any further. And so Mr. Actually, he did that before that, and then interested Mr. Vanderlip, and Vanderlip got this consortium together of 50 investors, and they bought this. So that was 1913. And they forged ahead and came and looked at it and chose a home site. Vanderlip came, and 1916 they actually built, and that's what we're looking at. That's the Vanderlip estate down there, and built a small, like a holiday cottage, where the family, the Vanderlips, who had a huge mansion on the East Coast, of course, came to vacation. And many of the historic books will tell how the family came out with their, I believe, 6 children or something like that, and did their vacations here. And then they started to develop plans, and the plans were grandiose. He was going to arrange a community for the entire peninsula, all 1,600 acres. Tuscan artisan villages, everything designed, regulated, under control. In other words, sort of like Paulsberg's Estates is now, which is actually the only example left of his dreams. He got the best architects. One of them is named Hunt, who's a famous architect. The firm of Olmsted, which in the end for this area were already the brothers and sons of the famous Olmsted firm who built Grand Central Park in New York. They were hired to do the landscaping, and they started bringing all the materials for this grand mansion that they were going to have. And he also commissioned a French model maker by the name of Gerber to build models of not only his mansion, but of the artisan village, which would have been where RPV City Hall is, behind the lighthouse there. And they were going to take in consideration the lay of the land, to lay out the streets so that they would follow the curves of the hills, and views would be preserved, and all these things. So they had great plans. Along came, of course, World War I, and the consortium a little bit lost interest in this whole project. Vanderlip himself was involved in the war effort and had other interests. And at this time, he also had, while they were still vacationing here and so forth, they had established a exotic bird aviary, and some of the birds that he had were peacocks. And during the time that the interest somewhat declined, these peacocks got loose, and they're the original flock of all the peacocks that we have nowadays, screaming their heads off in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock, driving us crazy. The rest of the birds, when finally the Vanderlips, later on in life, they gave the rest of the aviary to Wrigley, who had owned Catalina Island. The Wrigley estate got the birds. But anyway, what you see, a part of the grand plans was this villa, which never was built. They did manage over the years to build a couple guest houses, several cottages, the stables right down there is from that time. And also the grand staircase, which you can see here. You see the cypress trees sort of like sticks going up, and on top something sort of white, like a little Grecian temple. You with the binoculars can probably see it well. And this was part of the grand garden design that they had. Right now the stairs end at what's called the Villetta, or the Villa Narcissa, where the descendants, the granddaughter of the original Vanderlip still lives. And the original trees, the seeds for the original cypresses were brought from Italy, from a palace of one of the popes of Italy. And unfortunately, most of the originals burned. There was a big fire here in 1973. But luckily, the estate escape was untouched. So that helped. This hill that we're looking at here, this hill is called Jack's Hat. Many of the names that you will see on the maps, in fact now basically a lot of things getting renamed. Now since it's preserved, the chunks of various areas are called ecological reserves, and have a little bit different names, which is this committee that is working on that, naming them. So we all have to kind of say, now what was this one again? Where, where is this one again? I don't know whether Jack's Hat will stay Jack's Hat, but that's what it was called in the old days.
Oh, no thanks. Okay.
Yeah, it goes up the hill there. You can see it, and of course, this is Abalone Cove area, slide prone. We're also looking, and we can't quite see, we may see it as we go around. The major Portuguese Bend slide area is behind that bald field. And you see there is sort of a cut in the hill that's sort of yellowish with a couple of bushes on it, straight ahead. That's the side of the slide. And then you have to envision it goes down, and then this area comes back up again. So it slides from way up there where you see a lot of soil, yellowish soil up there. You see this big green field, and then it goes down into sort of debris back there, way back there. And that's all the Portuguese Bend slide area. That started sliding in 1956. And they pretty much agree that it started, there were always ancient landslides on the peninsula, a lot of places. The county allowed building on it. At that time, there wasn't a city here, it was a county. They allowed building on it, and promptly when everything slid, they had to demolish 100 houses and had to pay the owners. They were sued for several $1 million. No sooner that was said and done, Abalone Cove started sliding also. In 1974, they had a major slide. Mainly, they think because their drainage systems weren't very good. They had septic tanks. The streets didn't have very good drainage, and those are all the repairs that Rancho Palos Verdes has now done for decades, trying to get all that, dewatered and so forth. For years, the geologists discussed how to stop this slide. Most experts think you can really never ever stop it totally. The main cause is water on something called bentonite. Bentonite is tough, or way back millions of years, lava or dust from volcanoes. And eventually it deteriorates first into tuff and then into this sort of a grayish, powdery stuff. And when that gets wet, the water pearls off. It doesn't actually soak it and makes it, but it kind of pearls off and gives it that slide. And it's a huge amount on there. Many feet, some areas up to 200 feet deep, others real shallow. And that's what the land slides on. And it slides in chunks. It doesn't slide on one smooth thing. It slides in chunks, and it's ongoing. They've slowed it down, but we haven't had an El Nino, so nobody knows for sure. And they have at least probably 30 dewatering wells, and they pump all the time in various amounts depending on the rains and so forth. So they are working on it, but as you know, when you drive Palos Verdes Drive, it's they're fixing it again, and it's been moved again, and that's one of the reasons that you see all those great big pipes. That's actually sewage pipes.
Oh, sewage.
Actually, sewage pipes, and they have you can repair them and you can move them. And when you don't know, you kind of what are they doing here? And it's that. And that's anyway. Those are the stables that they have, and they had a pony club in there for the longest time. Or still have it, I guess. But that would be behind the Abalone Cove gates.
Okay.
The gates. Just a quick stop at a famous fennel, because one of the things that we have a lot of on the peninsula, fennel, of course, being an herb or kitchen spice. We think probably somebody maybe seeded it in the garden, decades ago or whatever. Very prolific, and you can see why. Zillions of little seeds. Feel free to take any. This is one of the things we do take out because it does proliferate so, and it spreads its seed so hard. It's very difficult if you have it in your garden. And you don't want it. It's difficult to take out. At this stage, for instance, it has huge tap roots, like carrots, go straight down. You have to cut it off at ground level, and it doesn't work any other way. You have to put Roundup on it right away while it's still wet. This was a process that the Conservancy, and originally, we were so grassroots, it was usually the board members. We went out and we attempted all these things, and of course hardly had a clue what we were doing. And we'd cut it off. Whereupon next year it has 20 little babies all around the main plant, and it's totally useless. Then we tried digging it out. We had wonderful help from school children and students and so forth, particularly Chadwick school students, who then came and diligently tried to you dig one out, you're basically half dead because it's such hard work. So that didn't work very well. So eventually we did learn in our efforts that there are certain methods that are more effective than others. And so we will, this is one of the things that we do also, we take out. And, it's labor intensive. And then we have another weed we have is ox tongue, which is also non-native. You see this a lot. You see this in your garden and so forth. And let's see, I'm trying to find a bigger leaf on this. The way it's called, the reason it's called ox tongue, and I can't find a particularly large leaf here, is because it's very rough and has sort of bumps on it. Presumably that's what a cow's tongue looks like. And it sticks to your clothes. And but it's a non-native, but it's everywhere, just so you know what it looks like. What I really wanted to point out to you is if you look over there, you see all those black mounds. One of the reasons, because we've had such a dry year, almost two, those are California natives, and you can see them down here. This is a buckwheat. That one looks a little better and is actually blooming. But they're still dormant. They're still trying to recover. So presumably and hopefully they haven't been damaged so by the drought that they won't come back. But right now they're still dormant, and that's why they look so dreadful. But we do hope they will recover if we get a little bit more rain. And I just wanted to show you that because it looks so awful. You look over there and you think, oh my goodness. I also wanted to add something else to the story on the vandalips. You have to remember in 1913 and up to the 20s, every building material had to come from the port of San Pedro, and then over dirt roads with mule carts and horses and so forth. That was the road around the peninsula wasn't open until 1926. So you can just imagine, carrying all that stuff. They already had some marble pillars and so forth that they had already started bringing because of this mansion that they were going to build, which we're told are still somewhere laying around there in the garden. But of course, it never materialized. But the effort must have been, huge. One forgets that. And you get the same story if you ever go to San Simeon, up by Cambria. Same story. They'll tell you that this huge mansion was, all this stuff came in the very hard way, but nearest harbor, I think, at the time must have been whenever they landed. San Simeon, what's there where they could have landed? San Francisco was too far. But anyway, again, with mule trains and everything like this, they tell you basically the same story. It's pretty interesting what effort and what money will do for you. And I don't know how much you followed the purchase of Portuguese Bend land in the newspapers or so forth. We or the city, we facilitated that the city could buy this from the Orange County developer called Mr. Hahn, H-O-N, and he always wanted to build he thought he could build, but if nothing else, he could build maybe another golf course in the slide area. And one of the things, because the Conservancy has been here since 1988, all these people know us. And we always say, if you ever think of selling, we're here. And but you can see it sometimes takes 20 years. And Mr. Hahn finally decided that he was going to give up. There was a golf course. Who knows what his reasoning was. And by now, the property values had gone up. So when he bought, or had to take, he had to basically buy the whole slide area, up the hills. All the stuff that is now part of the Portuguese Bend Nature Preserve came when he bought clifftop land, which is now Trump's golf course. He had a part of that, together with Mr. Zuckerman at the time. And in order to get this prime land, he had to take this slide area. But it was only he got it for $8,000 an acre. It is now by the state appraised at $40,000 an acre. So it wasn't a bad investment. And finally he realized, and then he contacted us and said, gave us a timeline, and that's why we had to do this, raise this money quickly, or he'd said, he would just do other things or whatever. And there's always people that say, well, just wait and he'll go down lower. But there's always, you don't know, should you grab it while you can or whatever. And so it's always a bit of a cliffhanger to do this. But anyway, that's a willing seller, and that's why this is now preserved, and presumably, hopefully, it will all be preserved one day. And